On episode 31 of Out of Play Area, the Game Developers Podcast, we sit down with Ben Retan, a lead AI and encounter designer at Hangar 13. Ben and I go way back to my first gig in the industry at Midway Austin, as well as he is a Full Sail alumni. He has had a super interesting career in development, both in and around game design, computer science, robotics, engineering, you name it, he's had a hand in it or some great thoughts to break down. On this episode, we talk about going full sail, Dave Arneson, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons. We talk about what it's like working at LucasArts. We sit and talk about the transistor and the gift that was to modern society. We definitely go deep on AI and some of the advancements and where that's going to take us and what he's excited about into the future. And in particular on this one, a major initiative called Dream Week that he had a big hand in bringing to fruition for his company. Coming to us from the Bay Area, Ben Retan. Let's fall the fuck out.
Bienvenue, welcome to the Out of Play Area podcast, a show by video game devs for game devs, where the guests open up one-on-one about their journey, their experiences, their views, and their ideas. No ads, no bullshit. Join us as we venture far out of the play area with your host, seasoned game designer, John Diaz.
You've lived many lives, Ben.
I'm a jack of all trades, but a master in none.
Some people need to be that way, man. You know, there's two ways to maximize.
Well, you can go deep or you can go wide. And I go deep on certain things like AI and game design, but I go wide on a lot of other things.
It's been a minute, man. The last time I saw you was down in the dirty ATX, the legendary Midway days. Rest in peace. I still look back on those days and can't even imagine like the wealth of talent, even when we were juniors and mixed with the veterans we had there, to see like what everybody would go on to work on and become. I always look back, right? There's a multiverse alternate reality where we all stayed together and like brought Midway back to prominence for the later part of the decade.
Those the 6 gyms, like you got your reality, you got, everything you're doing. I got my mind gym. Like we had other people that are graphics and like, everything. Like, aren't those like all just one piece to a giant puzzle?
It's true. You couldn't keep us together too long, right? There had to be balance to the universe kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We had to be scattered.
We had to be apart to come back together.
Yes.
I do imagine like if we did all come back together, then we might break the universe.
Those ships to Mars would have to come sooner than later, potentially.
I mean, I discovered water on Mars, right?
Dude, every time you tell me that, I have to take a pause and be like, what was this guy doing that he was already experimenting and looking ahead?
I was a young kid, I was great at math and science, and like I got discovered by the right people at the right time. That's the way I describe luck. Everybody has their definition of luck. And my definition of luck is being at the right place at the right time and knowing it. So like I was self-conscious. I was self-aware enough. Like even as a preteen, tween, I knew where I wanted to go in life. And I've always known that I wanted to make games.
Where were you at this time?
In Birmingham, Alabama. I grew up there. We had an amazing school system. The year that I graduated, our school in Birmingham, JCIB, the Jefferson County International Baccalaureate School, is founded for diplomats and for the students that were coming over as part of that culture. Like, because a U.S. degree isn't even recognized internationally. Like you go to Spain, you go to France, you go to, the UK, you have a high school diploma. It's like but you have a high school diploma from the U.S. What is that worth? And so they made this whole program, the JCIB or IB program, to make it internationally recognized. There was a whole IB accreditation and ACT, SAT scores. Actually, we had the highest ACT, SAT scores. I was one of 4 people who made perfect ACTs.
What's that, like a 30?
36. You do it by taking it repeatedly. You don't get a perfect on your first try.
They take the best score of each category, right?
Yeah, you can perfect it that way, but there's a true perfect. The same way that you get a true, skill unlock, or you get an achievement. Like I was unlocking achievements back in the day, that were real life achievements. And so they put us on the front of Newsweek magazine. Actually, the year I graduated. By the time I graduated, I think I'd taken something like 8 or 12 AP classes. I went straight into being a sophomore in college, but it didn't mean anything because the skills that I wanted to learn, they don't teach in college. Full Sail was the first place that I ever taught that actually taught me the skills that I actually needed.
Well, the ones that you wanted, right? To do the thing you wanted to do.
Exactly. It was a huge draw for me with Dave working there. Like, Dave
Arneson.
Yeah, the founder of D&D, the true creative.
Depending who you ask, yeah.
He is the Jobs to the Wozniak. He is the guy who is the producer. It's like the producer's going to take all the credit, and while you get your programmers in the background who are working hard, who are doing the job, who are doing the heavy lifting. Like, who's that guy on G4? Who's that guy on, on the IGN interviews? Who's that guy showing up at E3? He's up there. He's talking about the game. He's the hype man. He's the front man. He has a valuable role. And I don't want to discredit any producers or any executive producers, especially because I don't want to ever get blacklisted from something. The producers, they have a great role, but they don't understand the inner workings. They don't understand the minuscule details. And I wanted to go to Full Sail to study under somebody that taught the details. That taught how does this pawn move in chess? How does character move in Warhammer? Because that's actually what Dave studied, or that's what he did before he ever made D&D. I've had the privilege, the honor, and the privilege of sitting down with him and talking with him while he was still around. And, when we used to talk, I talked to him about what was it like making Wartop Gaming and making that thing, because Wartop Gaming was his bag back in the day. All these reenactments, and you see people pushing pawns around, or pawns, but you see people pushing groups of cavalry around on a board. That was Wartop Gaming. That was the way the generals, that's the way that people back in the day, go back to Greek times, that people would model, like they would get reports from the front. You know the term Nike, right?
Yeah.
That's from somebody running 26 and a half miles, like a fucking marathon. And they running back and then dying because they're reporting back to their generals. They're reporting back, they're saying victory, Nike. But that's the kind of stuff that he used to do. And that he inspired me so much. Like, it's in the details. Everything is in the details.
You got to Full Sail because that's this place that was actually teaching game design and development, right? I mean, there was a few options at the time that seemed to be closer to your stomping grounds in Birmingham.
I recently hired one of my ex-professors, Kayvon Acosta.
Shout out to Kayvon.
Yeah, he was talking to me, like he was saying, like, they've shifted their focus, they've split it into multiple tracks. So if you do want to be a producer, if you want to be the hype man, if you want to be the person who understands production, because it is a valuable skill, like
super valuable.
I've had to learn how to do it all.
There's places in the industry that claim like, oh yeah, we're flat, we don't have producers. But all that really means is that everybody wears a producer hat, right?
Yeah. Well, you still have to have, at the end of the day, you have to have somebody that checks off all the boxes, right? Like, even if you don't have a producer, you always have a product owner.
Yeah.
In Scrum methodology, you have the Scrum leader, and then you have the product owner. Like, Agile, everybody talks about Agile. Everybody talks about, oh, we're super Agile. It's like, yeah, that just means that you don't want to have organization sometimes. but I think the best organization, it comes up around organically. It comes from people stepping up, people taking the lead, people taking charge. You still have your goals. So what I do today as a lead, because that's my current position, I'm the lead AI and encounter designer. What I do is I work with my directors. I take their goals and I break those down into actionable tasks.
Okay.
I say to each one of the people in my group, or I delegate out to another lead, or give them what our requirements are. Like, I say to them, hey, and it's sometimes more ethereal or ephemeral, like we, as a director, I want to see combat be good. It's well, what does combat be good mean?
Yeah, like a user story kind of thing.
Yeah, you get this user story. And then as a lead, what you have to do is you have to break it down. And this is what production does, but the disconnect sometimes is the production side doesn't understand always the technical requirements.
Yeah.
They don't understand the Dave Arneson kind of details, like the little Snickers details is what my creative writing teacher used to say.
Snickers, like the candy bar?
Yeah. Well, when you write a creative writing paper, do you say, I went to the store and I got a candy bar?
No, you got to fluff it.
I went to the store and I got a Snickers.
Yeah.
The creativeness is in the details. And sometimes that kind of detail gets lost, across production and design. And it's not production's fault. Oftentimes, if you don't have a producer that's embedded with
Oh,
you,
yeah.
if they're not with you, like, if you don't have pods, like is the terminology they use in Scrum, like you don't have a producer for your pod, if they don't know every single day what every single person within that pod is doing and why they're doing it, and when it can be expected to be delivered, how can you expect anybody to produce anything when they don't even know what they're talking about?
Sure. I mean, like, what do you do in cases where you're like your team's kind of spread thin, and you got to share a producer across different features and strike teams? Like, how do you keep the communication?
We've got to step up.
Okay.
And they have to be the producers themselves. And that's what I've had to do in several situations. I've been in a 300-person team. I've been in a 3-person team. I've seen the gambit. Like I've seen, the small teams, the large team. And like I said, you got to take off that designer hat. You got to put on the producer hat. You have to understand what the constraints are. You have to understand what the deliverable time is. You have to understand why is my director asking for this in the first place? Because sometimes they say, I want game good, but what they really mean is, I want you to improve the controls.
Oh, yes.
You have to interpret that. You have to understand. But again, that's a level of communication. Like if you have a flat hierarchy, like, okay, well, you have a flat hierarchy. Does that mean that everybody's talking to everybody all the time? I've never felt a problem. Like, I've gotten in trouble for this at some companies, walking up to a person's office and just being like, hey dude, what's up? Like, walking directly to a person and asking them a question. Some places, they want you to stay in your channel. They want you to, swim in your lane, like going up to the director of the game and just asking them like, hey, like, I want to ask you about this. In some ways it isn't cool. Like, so when people talk about flat hierarchy, I think what they mean is open communication.
Yeah.
Like, the same way that we have open floor diagrams.
Yeah, you can go anywhere to anybody.
Yeah, look, well, I worked in QA, but I worked in QA for a software development company that did finance software. And if I walked up to the vice president of the finance software company and I just walked into his office and I was like, hey dude, like, what do you want for this thing? He would shut me down like in a second.
Man, I guess I can see that right on like teams of like on massive teams where multiple people need to be in the know, and if you kind of go around these little like checkpoints and stuff like that, then someone gets left out. And hey, how come Ben knows this thing and you didn't know, lead person or something like that?
Well, okay, so that's the reason why we made Discord. That's the reason why like Slack exists, is to try to all Slack is IRC with an HTML5 interface.
Damn.
Like that's all it is. Like anybody who's been using channels like since the original news groups that were pre-email, like news groups were just, it's a threaded channel, and that's like all we did was we made Slack for gamers. Like when I was working on Discord.
Well, it started for gamers, right? But now it's become just like widely adopted for any community.
So what we used to be doing is we used to be writing bots, like or Stan, the lead tech guy over at Discord, used to be writing bots for monitoring when boss spawns would happen in Final Fantasy 13. He would message them back to himself so they could log in and then like camp the spawns. Like that was the reason why he made all this stuff, so he didn't have to write those bots anymore.
This necessity of something kind of feeding technology, right, or apps, and then other people get their hands on it. But I could also do other things with this.
But I mean, but games aren't always about necessity; they're about art, and great art is something that touches you, it moves you. It is you as a viewer are now, or experiencer in the case of games, but you as the player, that you give them agency, you give them the power to explore the space. There was a talk by, there was, in the defense of like Siskel Ebert way back in the day. I think
the original critics, man.
Yeah, exactly.
What do they do? Do they do the two thumbs up thing?
Our games art, like, I don't think anybody argues that anymore. It's like whether not, and when I say games, I don't mean the art, the visuals of it. I don't mean the sound design. I don't mean the animation. Everybody like wholeheartedly agrees. But do you consider the maker of chess an artist?
See, that's an interesting one, right? Because I mean, I would not, man. I would consider it. Well,
whoa, dude, like really? Okay, come on. The person who wrote the rule set, the person who said that this, like, modeling, like, that's what Dave did. That's what Dave did. And that's the reason why I appreciate him as an artist. He said, this pawn moves forward. This is actually representative of 15 real people on the battlefield getting killed right now. Like, in their pawns, quote unquote, but they're representative of a group of people who are living, breathing, dying, just like you and me. Like, but it's the modeling, and the modeling of a system is an art form.
When you break it down like that, I will agree that that's an art, right? Like modeling something you see in the world down to some like sweet, contained, finite rule set. Like that, I think is an art.
One of my favorite exercises to give somebody who's on a job interview is like, make me a game, make me a rule set right now. Here's your constraints. Here's what the goal is, because you know the thing that defines a toy versus I used to talk to Frederick Marcus, who I was actually just looking up one of his IGDA talks yesterday. Frederick Marcus, great, brilliant game director. He used to work with Miyamoto. He'd come around to people's desks and you'd sit down with them, or maybe it was just me, because like he would come around to my desk. We'd sit down, we'd talk for hours about game design, about game theory, about like what makes a game. Like, how do you push yourself? How do you stress the system? Because if you're not stressing the system, if you're not defining it, you can live in a void. If you don't push your bubble out, like how do you even understand the limits? But the rule set. So the thing that makes, and I taught this at the Academy of Arts when I was teaching game design to art students, which in itself was a whole nother challenge, and especially considering several of them were ESL students. Like, you know, trying to teach somebody like where you're struggling to communicate with them in a basic conversation, try to teach them the most important thing and what defines a game is a victory condition or a lose condition. Until you know how you can win, and until you know how you can lose, you cannot have a strategy. You can't know how to get to that point. You don't even know where your goal is. You're shooting for the stars. You have to have an end goal in order to understand how you get there. And that's where strategy comes in. And that's when you can find the details, where you can find the, how do I do like this move instead of that move? And there's opportunity costs, of course. Like once you start to define, okay, what are the actions the players can take? Like once you have a goal, and then you can define the actions, then and only then can you have strategy.
I mean, that's game theory, right? Like there's a big evolution of competition, winning, losing, who's on top, who's on bottom. Going back to being a lead, being a designer through and through, that's done so many different things from end to end, bringing the game to life. You've really attached yourself to like AI and encounters.
Oh, that's only recently. I attached myself to several things throughout my career. Like I thought I wanted to do boss design, because bosses were the scripted moments within like longer cinematic games is what I would describe them as. Like when we were discovering like what 1313 was going to be, like when I was working at LucasArts, we went through iterations. We were like, years of Star Wars. Are we, you know, like massive Star Wars, Mass Effect? Like we tried on all these different hats or all these different kind of genres, and we try to see, you know, which one was right for us. But what we settled in was ultimately a cinematic shooter. But I wanted to make the big TV screen, or like now, like I think, you know, like with the streaming like culture, like you can have them on your TV screen. Like it used to be cinematic screen. It used to be like, you know, going to the movies, like, you know, those big moments of like, why do you go to the movies? First of all, you go to make out and like, you know, hang out with your girlfriend in the back of the theater. But like, you know, those big like on-screen moments, the Jurassic Parks,
those Hollywood blockbuster.
You know, James Cameron's first film was Piranhas 2, and he was one of 3 directors.
Damn. It's hard to see him sharing directorial power with anyone. Yeah.
I felt really hurt when LucasArts got shut down. It was and now they're reopening it as Lucasfilm Games, which I'm glad that they're doing that, but it's still, it was painful. It was painful.
You thought you were going to be there for life.
I was a Lucas lifer. I was ready to sign my kids up for like 10 years before they were born for the daycare there. Like that's how long the daycare line was. Like, because daycare was crazy
in the States for sure.
Yeah, I'm like I was looking at like establishing myself. My friend was working down at Java the Hut, down at a coffee shop.
That's the name of the coffee shop at LucasArts?
Yeah, well, it was back in the day. I don't know, after COVID, they shut a bunch of shit down. They shut down sessions. They shut down Java the Hut. My friend was the lead, or the executive chef, terminology. The executive chef over at Sessions. Shout out to Dan Biggers. He's good buddy of mine. Like he's helped me through the best and worst of times. There was something magic about that place. And I used to take people on tours. I used to walk them around the campus, and they shot one of the shots, like I think from episode 2, like in the fountain garden there, like they edited it to hell and back. But it was a very special place, and it still is a special place. You have Island there, you have all of the money makers, which are You know how Lucas makes his money, right?
Isn't it from merchandise?
Yeah, merchandising. They said it in Spaceballs. We have the Star Wars lunchbox. We have the Star Wars bedsheet. We have the Star Wars flamethrower. Like there's an interesting story there. I won't go into it, but if anybody wants to look it up online, there's an interesting story between, I think it was Sony and Lucas at the time, like about how he couldn't make the second film because he didn't have money, and the first film hadn't come out yet. But that was his thing, was that he was like, well, I will retain the licensing rights, and so Lucas licensing makes all the money.
Okay.
We had to license our own character back for The Force Unleashed 2. We had to license Starkiller from Lucas licensing. I shit you not. This is a true story. And go talk to the Keeper of the Holocron. There's also a guy who is the Keeper of the Holocron. Like who's the head of licensing, like the Keeper of the Holocron. You have to go talk to him, and like we had to license our own characters back for the sequel because they owned the characters from the first game. So that's the reason why if you ever played The Force Unleashed 2, you don't see any repeats except for Starkiller.
Because the licensing hurdles to jump through.
Yeah, we would have to pay them to use our own characters that we created.
Okay, so hold on. That seems a little crazy. I kind of understand from like a business, hey, this is the process, and to go around it creates like an exception clause or something like that. But like, you are LucasArts. Is that not essentially like first party to Lucas property?
Lucasfilm is the parent company, and Lucasfilm owns everything. So Lucas Financing, LucasArts, Lucas Isle, Industrial Light and Magic, Skywalker Sound. He has a non-profit organization. If you ever listen to NPR and you hear, brought to you by Lucas nonprofit, like they do a lot of great things. Like, yeah. But the money maker, the people who make all the money, is licensing. People ask like, why is Monkey Island coming out? Why is Day of the Dead coming out? Why are they doing Full Throttle? Why are they doing like TFU? Where's money come from? Like, how are they making it? And that was the reason why they ended up like chopping off. Sometimes you gotta chop off the arm of your baby, to make the game. Those something I learned at Full Sail. Sometimes in order to ship, or sometimes in order to sell to Disney, you gotta make some concessions, and you have to take out the least profitable section of organization. Because when Lucas started, and this is just hearsay, like what I've heard Uncle George said was like just make it true, make it good, and that was one of the things that drew me to the organization in the first place, was that it was the art for the sake of art. People don't recognize that the creation of a rule set is an art form. And it is unique, and it is like distinguishable, like between products. Like there can still be derivative art, there can still be iterations on your rule set. I made up a game one time when I didn't have enough chess pieces and I didn't have enough checkers pieces. So we made up a game called Cheskers, where it's like, well, for every chess piece, it moves like a chess piece. Every checker piece, it moves like a checker piece. And then at the beginning of the game, you got to design your own like starting set. You have to place the pieces. They had to be behind the second dot or whatever. But like in and of itself, just that slight modification of, you can either use checker pieces or chess pieces, and you can design like where they have placed your initial starting points. Yeah. That is seventh dimension kind of shit. Like like string theory, like if you want to go up to the 11th dimension, like as you get like higher and higher up the dimensions, like, because like I was saying before, I did astrophysics for a long time. Like I've thought about this, like what are the rule sets of the world? Like we have basic physics, like everything drops at a certain rate. Well, you can change those. Like at a certain point, you've gone enough dimensions up where it's not only about the rule set, but it's also about the starting conditions. It's about the what if we changed the Big Bang? What if the Big Bang was slightly bigger or slightly smaller? Or what if there were different elements that compose the Big Bang? Our most common element in the universe is hydrogen. That's how we get the redshift. That's how we when you observe like a star, you have to subtract out the hydrogen. But what if the most common element in the universe was oxygen? What if we were a nitrogen-based universe? You start getting into Thanos territory and multiple dimension, parallel dimension theory. But when you're designing a game, you should think about it like that. Think about it like, I have this little pocket universe. I have this this game I'm designing. And Will Wright actually talks a lot about this, about, designing Spore, and is about designing, SimCity was originally a helicopter game where you were going to fly over and shoot things with a helicopter. And he found that making the city was more entertaining, that the helicopter was going to fly over than actually the helicopter itself.
Man, I've never heard that story. I've heard a lot of Civilization, SimCity takes, but
He's big out here in the Bay. Like he's based in Oakland. You know, he has several projects, you know, that he does, and he does a lot of education and outreach. You know, well, that was one of the nice things about working at LucasArts. They brought in those people. They brought in Tim Meyer. They brought in Will Wright. They brought in, you know, some of the most seminal game designers. And I got to sit down with them. I got to sit down with Quentin Tarantino and be like, when you were working on Inglourious Bastards, how'd you come up with the screenplay? And I got to talk to him about, he was like, well, I went to this record shop and I was looking through these albums. And then like the sound design is what he focuses on first. Like, and if you're trying to make a game or you don't know like what game you're making yet, I highly recommend write the soundtrack first. Come up with and also watch High Fidelity because, you know, John Cusack, he describes it very well. You start out strong, then you kick it up a notch, then you draw it back so you don't blow your load too early. Then you do a slow build up to a crescendo. It's the same thing as Shakespeare. Like if you even go back to the classic 3, like the act structure of like, what are the major beats of your game? What are it's again, it's fundamental theory, but if you let the music drive the pace, you think about it that way?
Yeah, that's like pacing 101, man. You just kind of distilled it down to its like purest form. I like it.
As a multi-talented, instrumentalist, I play music, I do games, like, you know, it's like jazz, like, you know, like you can't just like let it be free form or whatever. Like I personally prefer a pop song over jazz. You know, you can't just go off. Yeah, a little bit of structure helps the audience understand the message. You try to get a message across. Like, what is your takeaway? And I asked this to Brian Sharp. You know.
Yeah, dude, Brian Sharp. I got to connect with that guy.
I asked him, like, he was talking to me about meditation and yoga. And I was like, what's the takeaway? And he's like, what? He's like, there's no takeaway. Like, my mind is so focused.
You're trying to min-max, man. You're trying to be like, all right, what's the point? What am I going to get out of this?
Well, you know, that's what we as, you know, apex predators / you know, with survivalists, you know, well, whatever you want to define your personal like human gameplay as being. But, you know, we look for patterns. And because you know why we look for patterns? It's because it actually takes our brain less energy. Like if you have to think about something, if you have to process something, thinking takes calories. It takes calories. You actually have to think harder, and then you burn energy. And so what we try to do is we try to find patterns, we try to find similarities, and so our big brain, like, you know, theory, it creates these neural pathways, and like neuroscientists talk about this all the time about the min-maxing and the optimization of finding patterns within society. And so that the Genova Chin actually talks about like the flow state a bunch. And like, you know, to get into a flow state, you have to like get those like neural pathways built, but then you have to alter them.
Yes.
It's Mario and the turtle, like the very first level of Mario. If you don't touch the controller, Mario runs forward. Like, I don't know if you ever tried this before. Like it was something that was brought up to me in a different game design talk. If Mario just runs forward, he runs straight into the first Goomba. Because Goomba is right under 3 blocks, and there's a 4th block on top of it. If you did nothing, first of all, you can't run backwards. So pushing the back
screen moves with you.
But I want to be very clear. Just like quantum theory, like the absence of input is still an input. Like the absence.
That's like your zero case, right?
It's quantum theory. It's a Schrödinger's box. It's you know, the cat, you know, when you look inside the box, if they're alive or dead, the cat, poor cat, let's say, you know, it's
look inside the box.
It's something that has less like emotional attachment. You know, if you look inside the box and you have a bit, you get a coin. You either have a coin or you don't have a coin, because cats are much more valuable than but by not looking at the box, that's how that. So I have one tattoo on my wrist, and this is the most important thing. I know your viewers can't see it, but the most
describe it for me.
It is what's called a PNP transistor. It has an input, it has a connection, and it has an output. It's also referred to as a type of switch, basically. So you can either switch it on or off. But the connection, it's the most basic form of a transistor. It's what we have millions of inside of your phone, inside everything that you do. It's the most important invention since the plow. I talk about this a lot. And sometimes
it kind of has a plow shape, though. That's the crazy thing about it.
Well, the plow allowed us to become an industrialized, like civilized society. My mentor, Mr. Hollis, rest in peace. He taught me about the fundamentals of electronics. Again, this goes back to like why do I think I was more successful than my counterparts? Going through programming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's because I was taught robotics. I was taught from the ground up. I had the privilege and honor of being part of a program which was the pre-computer and engineering program that was developed by Mr. Hollis as a alternative education kind of thing. Like he recognized that high schools were not teaching computer science. They were not teaching. He was one of these punch card guys back in the day.
Oh gosh.
I've seen the stacks of punch cards, how he used to program computers.
That's the OG, and like miles and miles of punch cards feeding instructions, all bits, right? You just kind of
and you drop the stack, and they're like there goes my entire evening.
It happened. Man.
No,
we're all klutzes.
There's lots of war stories from the war room of being in your in the zone. You're trying to develop. You're trying to hit a deadline. And then you drop the stack of cards. But
it's the equivalent in like what we do today.
You delete the repository.
Oh God! But you could always recover that, right?
No. Not you delete your local repository. You delete the repository.
Oh my gosh.
The remote repository.
Which
imagine you deleting your GitHub.
Oh my God! Permissions, man.
That would be the quick one today. But what I was trying to get at, and I think a message I want to send to your listeners is that. The transistor is the most important invention in the last 100 years. And it's how we taught rocks to think is the way I describe it to people. Wait,
who's the rock?
The rock is the quartz, it's the crystal, it's the transistor that's made out of silicon.
Oh,
it's how the silicon is a crystal. It's technically a rock, the
which are finite, right? Like,
have you ever thought about the rock that we live on is just a big enough rock that we can't jump off it?
Is that because of the gravitational pull, because of the size?
Yeah. It matters. It really matters. It matters a lot to me.
I can't jump off this damn rock.
Yeah, it's just a rock. It's so big you can't jump off it. But like every single thing that's inside of a computer. Well, there's JTAG, the Joint Task Action Group, or the people that made the original integrated circuit, the IC. They're the people that made the silicon-based kind of things. And it's funny now because I've gone way into the hacker community. There's JTAG connections on everything in your phone and your water heater and your everything. Like you can tap into these JTAG connections. And if you know the fundamentals of electronics and computer circuitry, you can actually decompile the instructions that are being sent along those things. That's how people hack phones. That's how people do all this shit. But at the fundamental level, all it is not quartz, but it's silicon based, crystal. Do you know why quantum computing is so big now? Why it's so important?
I've always looked at it as just like kind of the massive leap in processing that we can achieve with it.
Where does that massive leap in processing come from?
I mean, I imagine there's some crazy jump across the number of cores that you're sandwiching together.
See, that's the old school thinking. So do you know why we sandwich cores together in the first place?
I guess we're just running out of space, or we started going vertical.
An electron, if you can only make a channel so narrow, so tiny, so compact, before the electrons start jumping channels, where they start jumping between left and right. That's the reason why multi-core processing came about, was because we were hitting Moore's law. We were hitting the maxes.
Yeah.
And, we were not able to accelerate the processors any faster because we made them as small as we could. And literally electrons were jumping back and forth.
And then heat's an issue, right? Heat and space.
Heat and space, yeah, definitely. The heat increases the positive charge, and then it's a byproduct of the positive charge. But the electrons were jumping across channels when they try to make these, you can only make them a molecule thick.
Yeah,
as small
size we can get to.
So quantum computing came about because of the fact that they now have reached. They're starting to, at least, we're going to plateau on Moore's law if we don't actually have a way to make things that are smaller than a molecule. Like
Yeah,
when you start going to subatomic particles,
we got to change the game now, right? Like how we approaching, how we building this.
Okay, so there's two major game changers in that. First of all, how the fuck do you maintain that without a giant cooling system? Like,
Yes.
when I was working on the Mars rovers, like we had a whole liquid nitrogen cooling system for any of our stuff. But if you want to go subatomic, like if you want to go,
Ant-Man,
particle smasher like level, like you first of all, one of the huge gains is that you now are working with a trinary system. And I'm bringing it all back. Like while trying to stack, the important thing about like I'm saving this wrist, my other wrist, for the first pocket quantum computers.
How far away you think we are?
Less than 100 years. I think I'll see it before I die. Like I think we're gonna extend
I like that.
like past 100 years. Like anyway.
So give me a goal, man. Like stay healthy, stay alive long enough to see this thing. See what people do with it, because the civilization is going to move at a ridiculous pace once that comes together like that.
We solved the disease of aging. Aging is just a disease, like the same way that anything else is a disease. We've been able to figure out how to stop like cells from degenerating. Like when your cells split, they degenerate, and then like that's the reason why we have a finite lifetime. But quantum computing, getting back to the topic, quantum computing. One of the things like about it is that it is a trinary system. Instead of being a binary system, instead of being ones and zeros, which is what we describe as electrons, like, ones, zeros, jumping tails.
Positive, negative,
positive, negative. That's what this is all about. That's what the PNP transistor is all about. It's like, if you don't put anything in, it doesn't connect. If you put something in, it connects.
Yeah.
But that's binary. That's where the ones and zeros come from. That's like literally the basis of all binary is a transistor. But with quantum computing, now you have a trinary system. Now you have 1, 0, or I have not yet observed it. The act of not observing it is in itself a state.
Oh, there we go.
Quantifiable state. They can be used in quantum computing. They talk about this in string theory and about this in quantum computing like theory. If you've ever taken, there's some great courses online, by the way. If you were interested in quantum computing, they offer them for free from MIT and from Stanford and from Berkeley. Like there are all these great free online quantum computing courses. I recommend you go check them out.
I'm with it. So like if I'm breaking it down into like, let's say I'm writing a scripting node, I'm breaking it down like, there's a on, off, and not yet observed. Not yet observed. Okay. Is there a symbol? Is there a symbol for that state? Is there like a ASCII character?
No, that's because I'm saving my other wrist for that symbol. Like there are a couple of diagrams online, but they're conflicting.
No one's standardized it yet.
The second most important thing of quantum computing. So the way that we normally transfer information around the world right now is through fiber optic, right?
Light, yeah.
Yeah, through light. And so what is faster than the speed of light?
I don't know.
Quantum entanglement. So through the act of quantum entanglement, we can actually beat the speed of light. Through that, like that's the reason why quantum computers are so fast, is they move faster. It's the first. Everybody talks about like Star Trek and everything. It's like no, we actually have measurable, quantifiable. Like the only way they can do it is they shoot a beam of light, and then they see that it's faster than the light. They shot it across a lake with like a 50-mile wide lake, and then you can see that the particle got there faster than the beam of light. Like we have scientific ways of measuring light, and we have scientific ways of measuring quantum entanglement. And so I could communicate with China faster than the speed of light right now. Like if I had a quantum entangled quantum computer.
Okay, bro, you just broke it down for me, man. It's a trinary system that opens up a whole nother factor of outputs and instructions, and something that moves faster than the speed of light, which I didn't even know was an element, or like it's not even what is
the way you do it is by folding dimensions. You go through the fourth dimension up to the fifth dimension, and then like by having the two particles they're entangled, like you fold dimensions. That's the only way you can get faster than the third dimension.
Okay, I understand. At a high level, with my caveman brain, I understand the core elements of quantum computing and how we bring it back to from the transistor to this new mechanism, how we get here.
Yeah, but let's talk about games.
Let's talk about games, man. After that, making games is easy, bro. Let's go back to making games. All right.
Let's stop solving like quantum entanglement and
but this is exciting, right? This is exciting because I definitely wanted to ask you of like, where are we going? Where can we get to? And And is even quantum computing like within the foreseeable future, and how would that change what we do? So, I mean, let people noodle on that and speculate, and we can always talk about that in the future, because that's just a topic that's not going to go anywhere. We're just going to keep getting closer and then figuring out all the different applications of it. But for people today coming to you and admiring what we do, what you built.
Okay, well, so everything is just a tool, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how fast your computer is. Like, you have the fastest gaming rig. That doesn't make you the greatest game designer.
Good
like,
point.
The design is about like experiential. It's about agency, and it's the difference between a book and a movie versus a game. Like, it is a passive media versus an active media. And through games and through interactive entertainment, we can build engagement, and we can build these neurons like firing through our brain. But every step of the way, that's kind of like where I was trying to get at originally, was we as game designers, what we do is we build hurdles. Like, we build hurdles, and you have to be able to jump over that hurdle. If I made a 10-meter high hurdle for a 3-foot person, you're not going to be able to jump up that hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make achievable goals. It's a systematic pattern, and it follows the Shakespearean method of, like, give people agency, give them like power, give them, or at least some of the best games that I've experienced do this pattern. They give you agency. They give you the ability as a player to be able to enact that agency, to show what I call player skills. So you have the player skills, and as an AI designer, like, if we want to get back on the topic of AI design, like, what I have to do as an AI designer, and what I do every day, is I make achievable hurdles. Like, I make
Against the player's skills.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So if the player skill is dodge, right?
Yep.
I give you a bull that runs straight at you.
Yep.
And you have to learn, like, it's going to keep charging straight at you, and you have to dodge left or right. Like, it's an achievable goal. But it's testing your mastery of the ability to dodge left or right.
Yes. With what you do today, Ben, how hands-on are you versus kind of more managerial? Is that up to you? Do you get to pick? What approaches do you have for that? What do you like? What do you wish would be different?
I am a big believer in leading by example. And my managerial skill is, I get in there every day. I would never ask anybody to do something I wouldn't be able to do myself, or couldn't do myself. Or how can you be working with production, or if you don't have production, how can you be a producer yourself if you can't understand the amount of time it would take to do so? Or whether or not it is a known unknown, or if it's an unknown unknown. Like, an unknown unknown is basically, in the production process, you have pie in the sky, you have prove, produce, and some people call these things like L gates, or some people call them like, different milestones or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have you have like the seven P's, I think is what we call it, or something like that. You have pie in the sky, proof, or pre-production, prove, produce. Then you have the ship, and you have the final post-production. Like, ship is the only one that it doesn't follow the P methodology. You have these very clearly defined phases. If you can't get over that initial hurdle, if you're a game designer, and like, if you're a fledgling game designer, what I've seen people struggle with, and I've being a teacher, being a professor, being a person who's analyzed games again and again, like, I always say, well, what is your goal? What is your, and we talked about this at the beginning, bringing it back, what is your win or lose condition?
Yes.
Until you have a win or lose condition, you don't know where you're going. And then, and only then, can you define what the player skills are, because not every Mario can jump in 3 dimensions. Like, some can only jump in 2 dimensions. Like until you give the player power, until you give them that agency, like, you can't start to begin to define what are the obstacles that you have to like present to them with an AI. And the AI, well, again, shout out to Sergio Ocio. He was a big believer in AI should be the world's best second place finisher.
always like right on your tail.
It should always be something that is challenging, but that is surmountable.
Yes.
And it is something that you can do, but it should always be achievable to do. And it should be like increasing itself over time, like as you were getting better as a player. So there are 2 types of games, or actually there's 3 types of games. There's social games, board and card games, and then video games. that's a whole nother thing. But within video games, within that third spectrum, there are two types of games, and there are, ones where you increase your player skill. So it's things like Super Meat Boy, things like, where in order to achieve success, like, Binding of Isaac, like you have to not level yourself up as a character. You have to level yourself up as a person. Like you got to get better. Like there's no way you can beat this next level unless you get better. Not my stats are getting higher. Like it's not a Mass Effect. It's not I just went and grinded out like a Final Fantasy, right? You can't beat the boss, go grind it out. You go stat up your character. Like you're leveling up your character, you're not leveling up you as a person. You're not learning new skills. You're not learning how to be a better combatant. You're not learning how to defeat the boss more effectively. Where all you're doing is you're statting past it. And that's increasing the stats of the character. It's not increasing your skill as a player.
Yeah, putting in your reps, right? Just constant repetition, like exercise, right? Like building the muscle, just doing it over and over and over, getting your timing down, your dexterity down, your reaction, observation.
Right. Imagine it. I mean, and there are some apps that do this now. It's like, imagine every rep. It's like, oh, you're going to rep this like barbell. Now you're going to rep this like pull up. Now you're going to rep this thing. Every single thing. Yeah. Well, just like building your body, building your mind. You gotta be holistic about it. You can't just like, work the same thing over and over again. You have to actually try yourself, test yourself, like, push yourself in all these different dimensions, in all the 11 dimensions, like with quantum computing.
What is kind of like the most exciting development in AI that you've seen in a while?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if you know, but we're way, way behind. I mean, and like, that's the reason why I got into acting recently.
In games.
Well, no, AI especially is they now have access to quantum computing in some areas, and that what they're utilizing it for and what they're doing is so there's different types of machine learning. So AI is a whole field, but AI is a superset. It's a larger set of different types of subsets. And where all the most advancements are being made right now is machine learning, but people are not applying it as well as they could. I have my own developments I've been doing for the last 5 years, even before I was at 2K, like on machine learning architecture and how to make a game engine that's based on machine learning architecture. But machine learning, again, that is a superset. It's like, okay, well, within machine learning, you have imitation learning. You have there's about like 12 different types. The important part is that there are so many different types of machine learning that you can do now that are based on Q learning or deep learning, where you take a large set of data, and this is where data mining processing companies come from. This is where your Facebooks come from. This is where your Amazons come from. But they're way behind Alibaba. They're way behind Tencent. In China, like the coolest thing I saw at GDC this past year, and the coolest AI I saw was a thing called Wukong AI. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's basically
How you spell that?
Wukong, like the Monkey King. It's in some mythology, but a Wukong AI. It's
damn. It's like beats a team of pros. Okay.
Yeah. Team of pros at because it has to use reinforcement learning. It has to use imitational learning. It has to use team-based group tactics. The same way that I give a player agency. When I make an AI, it's called an agent. So the agent is the thing that has agency. Like I make an AI agent, it has agency the same way I give a player agency. Like I can model like a player versus like these things. But like up until this point, there are certain things, I don't know if you know about like CAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA and like reCAPTCHA 2. The reason why you now have to pick out like stop signs or whatever.
Or rotate the little thing in the right direction.
All you're doing is you're training AI there.
Oh, God.
You are training AI every time you do a reCAPTCHA. Like, look it up. Like that's how they catalog every single library in the world. Now they have they got the London Library. They got the New York Times. They were able to categorize the New York Times in like a matter of weeks because there are certain things that the computers can do better than humans.
Yes.
But through reinforcement learning and through imitation learning is what it's called. We can actually train computers to do the things that they can't do. So we're making AI right now that are better than us. But the only reason why they're better than us is because we don't have infinite memory. when you go to sleep at night,
The RAM gets flushed, bro, or committed to a long-term memory. Yeah.
yeah, your RAM gets flushed. Yeah, you take a short-term memory, you commit to long-term memory, but you don't have an infinite hard drive space. You can't
Mm-mm.
terabyte up your brain. Like you can't add more storage space. Like it's not extendable storage.
I like to think, man, it's elastic enough, right? You can kind of keep building and stretching it and building those neurons. But you're right? Like things that you can't test everything constantly, right? So things that you haven't used in a while are gonna kind of fade away, right?
The whole machine learning architecture, especially if you've ever written a recursive algorithm, like you understand how machine learning works. It's what's it called, a Markov chain. The idea is that instead of having memory, what you do is you collapse the memory into a single state. And it's like, I don't have a brain that can remember everything. I have a brain that can only hold so much. But if I change it every day by using like what I've learned today in order to affect like the current state of it, then that is machine learning. Like literally all we did is we said, well, what if we take this thing that has infinite space and we give it a limited amount of space? And now with the limited amount of space, we have to rewrite, we have to change the rules, the way that it approaches something like every day.
What I've always enjoyed about AI design, right, is kind of surprising the player, right? That's what I've always kind of pursued whenever I'm down deep in some behavior trees or GOAT models or whatever like that. What applications for games are you excited about?
I think the most exciting things, like I said, with looking at Wukong AI is like if you played against like competitive players and if you played against like real world players, modeling real world players, I think that like any person who's into competitive gaming, like we do this whole like survey where it's like, what are you? Like, what type of gamer are you? Are you a casual player, a competitive player? Are you a story-driven player? Like, we have like all this modeling that we do like within my company, like in order to find our target demographic. That's a big part of like selling games and marketing games. Is finding a target demographic. So it depends. It depends on what your demographic is. It's a multifaceted question. What is the best AI? The best AI is what is matched to that player style. Like it depends on your player style. If you are a solo driven story person, then like the best thing for you is going to be a series of hurdles that are slightly higher and that drop back down that give you a sense of power at the end of every chapter. So you complete a game, you go through the first act of the game, you get really strong, and then you go into the second act and you just demolish everything. You feel great. Because you're like, oh, well, I completed the first chapter. Here's my reward. Here's my extrinsic and intrinsic reward. Like I'm both more powerful stat-wise and more powerful as a player. You get that adrenaline rush, that dopamine like release, because the game has shown you that, hey, you completed this thing that was really difficult. And so that's how you make solo games. That's not how you make multiplayer games at all.
No.
It's completely different. It's completely different. When you're making a multiplayer game, if I was to make an AI for a multiplayer game, or when I have made AI for multiplayer games, the focus is not on like these series of hurdles. It's about pushing your depth. It's about testing your mastery of different skill sets. And you could say that's kind of similar to what you do in a single player game, but it's the testing and the mastery is no longer driven by some narrative. It's now literally, how fast can you achieve this? It's, can you jump? Can you walk? Can you run? Can you do this? And the faster you can test somebody's mastery and then putting them against a real player as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And then observing what the real players do against each other. And that's what we call imitation learning, is now we model an AI off of the imitation of what a real player would do.
I like that, right? Because my problem has always been that for the solo player who's trying to solely get better by beating on bots, is never, ever going to be a match for somebody who's been playing other people. But maybe the goal is that...
the Wukong AI, the stuff Tencent made, can now beat 99.97% of the players or something like that. Like, it literally, it's an unbeatable AI. It first came about after, I assume you're familiar with the game Go.
Oh, yeah. I've never played it, though, but I know about it.
One of my mentors, one of the people who used to work at LucasArts, Clint Hopkins, he talks about Go and about how there was this Japanese, very famous game of Go, where like you had the traditional person who was very, like into the game of Go, who like was like traditionally trained. And you had the upstart, you had the new guy who was like, post World War II, Americanized, Japanese Go player. And he did a very deceitful thing. He metagamed. He realized that at the end of the day, when you sign like your move or you put your move into an envelope for the next day, because games of Go can last multiple days. That's how in-depth Go is. Instead of chess where they're slapping the clock every 2 seconds, They're trying to be as fast as possible because there is a finite moveset in chess. Go have a much more larger probability space, which is why it takes several days. But Clint Hawking, he talks about this match where there was a very deceitful thing where if somebody made a move that was insignificant because they gave him 24 hours to think about his actual next move. And the Go master was very offended by this. He's like, you're not playing
for real.
Yeah, you're not playing for real. You're gaming the system. You're literally metagaming at this point. Like you're playing the meta.
He knew that if he gave him 24 hours to think about, a move that he wanted to get to his like space or something versus just kind of wasting that time.
Yeah. Instead of making the next logical move, he made an illogical move that gave him more time to think about the next logical move. He made what would be, if there was infinite time, if there was not a time between the last move of the match and the next move of the match the next day, there wasn't 24 hours, then he would have played differently. If he was forced to, on the spot, make that decision, he metagamed it. It was like one of the first examples of metagame, like where he realized the rule set and he took himself outside of the rule set. Instead of playing as a player, he played as a person who's trying to win.
Yeah, play to win.
Yeah, play to win. Outside of play.
I mean, that used to not be a factor of the game, right? If you're breaking down the rule set, there's no thing that says like, hey, humans get to take a break after this much time, right? Like that was not something that was written down.
That was something that when the Go people like invented Go and they were drawing with sticks and rocks on the ground, which is how Go was originally created. We were drawing with like sticks and rocks on the ground. They were playing Go with a bunch of black rocks and white rocks or whatever. Like that wasn't something they considered. That was not something that was part of the original rule set that the person who, like I said, like chess, the chess person like didn't think, oh, well, if I give people infinite amount of time. And again, it comes back to the fact that there is a much more finite rule space in chess than there is in Go. In Go, there's a factorial of greater of number of moves because every time you put down a rock, it can cascade and it can like capture things and
changes the whole space. Yeah,
exactly. So when Tencent solved the Go AI, basically, it was a thing in like 2018. It was like almost 3-4 years ago now. When they solved that, like not Tencent explicitly, but when they solved that within that space, it was a huge thing. It's called AlphaGo. It was like, it went from like Deep Blue to like they had, so Deep Blue, I don't know if you remember Kasparov, like, back in the 90s. Like,
yeah.
He almost bought the Presidio.
Damn, wait, when you talking about the Presidio, you talking about like Bay Area?
They were trying to determine like what they were going to do with this park space in northern San Francisco. Him and Lewis bid on it back in like the 90s.
And look, grandmasters make that much money?
I don't know where his funding was coming from, but I think the U.S. government decided that the idea of using it as an arts and entertainment center instead of like cutting down all the trees and turning it into like some kind of like residential place was more beneficial to the city as a whole. But the Kasparov actually bid and he was outbid or his proposal was not as good as Lucas's, which is why we have the Presidio up in San Francisco.
How far away are you from the Presidio?
A couple blocks, like
you walk over.
A stone's throw. I mean, I can take a bus. I can be there in 12 minutes.
Nice. I like being near greenery, man.
Before this, I was working up in Novato, and I really miss the city, and so I'm glad to be back in it. Like it was a little bit disconnected working in the North Bay, but I think I'm really happy to be back in the city.
I gotta ask you, right? Activision's in the news, major purchase by Microsoft, right? Like almost $70 billion to buy the whole thing, and everybody has this speculation as to the wins and the IPs, but you can't argue the portfolio.
They also merged with Zynga as well. You heard that part, right?
Hold on. Zynga was Take-Two.
Not encapsulated by, 2K. 2K encapsulated Zynga. Now 2K encapsulated Zynga.
Yeah.
And Microsoft Activision. Yeah. I call it Activision.
Which major purchases all like in the same time window, right? Like big ass acquisitions.
Well,
for sure.
it's in the fiscal year. It's like when these kind of things come out. Like they've been working on this the same way that they could have told us a year ahead of time when they were going to shut down LucasArts because the Disney deal was going through. Like they could have told us. Instead, Kathleen Kennedy came down and tapped Jeff Morris, my producer, on the shoulder and said, "By the way, you can't release this game today." Like it was literally we were live for an Xbox Live, or we were ready to like pull the trigger on an Xbox Live beta with 10,000 people. Some people data mined and they found the cover on the store. We were ready to go. Like sometimes production and anybody who doesn't understand that the games are driven by marketing, here's a slap in the face for you, with a bucket of cold water. The reason why most game companies fail today is not because they don't have good games. It's because they don't have good marketing. And marketing, and this is the reason why Zynga could buy out companies. It's the reason why they could, recreate games. It's because marketing is 60% of your budget. If you're if you're interested in being the next Danny Bola, going off and making your own like game studio.
Shout out to Polyart.
Next Polyart. Yeah, shout out to Danny. Why doesn't every Full Sail graduate like go out and just start their own game company? It's because it doesn't matter like the production costs. What matters is new user funnel. And this is what we figured out on Discord. And it's because it's not about making a great product and not about making a great game. It's not making it about a great platform. None of that matters if you do not have marketing. The majority of your budget, like 60% of your budget, if you're going to make a game title, it should be allocated towards marketing, because you can buy clicks, you can buy likes, you can do viral marketing.
You can buy streamers.
You can do everything you can like to make a great game. But if nobody plays it, is that a great game?
That's a good point, man. Nobody knows about it, right? Like, I mean, you have these indie breakout hits, right? That over time, word spreads, word of mouth, and that's how they come up without zero marketing. But it's rare and far between, right? That's why these publisher deals exist, right? As shitty or much as you want to avoid them or do your own thing, they help get the word out, right? They get you on these storefront pages. They're in their catalog, right?
People have asked me, like, you have good ideas. Like, why don't you try to make your own venture? And I have.
It would have surprised me, man.
I've started a dozen companies over the past 10 years. Like, my first company ever was the most successful when I was 16. I made a company called Magic City Web Design. I made websites for mentally disabled groups, not the groups themselves, but for people who are advocates of them. So the things like the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill or the Alabama Family Trust, like I was working with nonprofits in the area, like, and this is during the early 2000s. So while people were still figuring out what the web was, like,
timing must have been a big part of that for sure.
Yeah, it was a big part of that. Like, I mean, it helped pay for my college education. That's how it funded. Thank you to my grandparents and my parents for helping with that as well. Part of my college funding actually came from the profits from that venture, but I've made probably at least a dozen companies over the past several years. But the important thing is you have to have not just a product, and that has to not just be a marketable product. There has to be a market for it. You have to know what your target is.
Who's going to be playing this thing? Who's going to be buying this thing?
Yeah, who's going to be playing this thing? Who's going to be buying this thing? Like when
very often, right? Like it's rare.
One of my favorite phrases when dollars come to donuts.
What?
It's Southern phrase, or maybe it's just something I heard over the years.
Do not repeat that, man. I haven't heard that one.
Dollars to donuts?
What does that break down to?
How do you get fed at the end of the day?
Are
you making money with your game? Are you
eating? Are you eating?
Yeah, are you eating? Like when the shit hits the road, or when road meets the pavement, or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of turn phrases out there. I've seen very few people who've struck out on their own. One of the people I really look up to, again, I got to give big shout out to Ken Hudson. He was our guy back in the day.
Yo, I'm going to link up with him, man. I'm linking up with him. He's going to be on the podcast not too long from today.
I would love to hear that podcast. Please bring him on the show. Please bring him on the show. But no, he's one of the few people that struck out, like doing his own venture. But the reason why I felt like he was so successful, and I think he actually won an Academy Award for one of his things. He went back to work with Clint on Watch Dogs Legions. Like they're up in Toronto. In that area.
Actually, I think he's in this new spot called Brass Lion Entertainment, but I think he's out of Toronto.
Yeah, out of Toronto. But he was one of the few people that I've seen really strike out on a new venture. Like, go stake claims.
Break from the mold.
Yeah, break from the mold and go out there and, just took a simple idea, or like a core, what we used to call in Full Sail, like the nugget.
The nugget? What's your nugget?
Yeah, what's your nugget? Like, what is your core idea? He took it, he marketed it, he got the whole package down right. And it's something that I look towards, maybe one time doing in the future. But the only way I would do another product, or I'd strike out on my own, is if I had a platform first. And the game would be a product of the platform.
Hell yeah.
I believe in platforms, when I was working with Jason Citron at Discord, he's like, there's three major things you got to think about when you're starting a company, or when you're starting a product or whatever. It's people, product, process. on my last game, like I can't talk too much about it because, it was never released, but we were trying to do too many things at once. We had a new team, we had a new product, we had a new process. And if you want to do all three at the same time, like it's going to take a long time to develop each one, like longer than a normal game dev cycle.
Of course.
Like if you're going to make something new, you should focus on one vector out of those three. If you're going to have a new team, then fine. If you want to make a sequel to, the greatest game of all time, something like, like you want to make the next League of Legends or something, like, you're going to make League of Legends 2 or Dota 2, ironically, like you have to have a understood process, an understood product, which they did. And then you have to have new people. Like you can't do all three at the same time. It's good, fast, cheap, right?
Yeah. Damn, man, you just broke down the Riot Games success story right there, man. I never even thought about that, right? Like, hey, they just kind of looked at something that was proven and existed, and they didn't have to kind of reinvent it so that they can then build out their team, right? Which then kind of facilitated building out their process and tools, and then
they already had a pretty well understood and established process. Like I think, at least from my understanding, they had a tool set, they had an engine, they built the engine. Like, but I also understood their market. You know what the greatest thing about League of Legends is?
What's that?
It runs on any machine.
Yeah.
Any machine. If you're a Brazil player, if you're a quick, like if you're playing a Mordekaiser, like you can still enjoy the product.
Hell yeah.
Being an educator, being an instructor, like I think about things. I try to break it down for people. I hope the message gets across because I have my own thought process and not everybody thinks the same. Like I don't want to expect everybody to have the same experiences like as well. There's the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Lots of people can be intelligent, have a high int score. Like if you want to get down to D&D terms.
Yeah.
Like, why do clerics have high whiz and low int? And why do sorcerers and wizards have high int and low whiz? It's because I think there are too many wizards and sorcerers in the game dev industry. Like there are people that have a really smart brain, but they don't stop and smell the roses. They don't see the full picture. In the Myers-Briggs terms, like, you can be a person that is thinking or feeling, but you can also be a person that is observant. ENFP or ENTP, like or MY2, like Myers-Briggs. Like, do you see the trees or do you see the forest?
Yeah.
You get caught up on this sensory input, or are you perceptive? Do you see the bigger picture? The leaders that I look to and the people that are mentors to me are people that they can take that step back and say, hey, let's not talk about a game. Let's talk about the game industry. And that's what I love what you're doing here with this podcast. You're taking people out of the moment. You're saying, okay, let's stop thinking about like when the next milestone is, what your next task, what's your next like deadline. And you say to people, hey, let's talk about this holistically. Let's think about this for a second. Why do we make games? And that's what Dream Week was all about for me. When I first proposed the idea to 2K, Dream Week was, something that it's about the why, not the what. It's not what are we making, it's like, why are we making it in the first place? And I think you could do this with any industry. What Dream Week was, it was 5 days. It was a full work week where, I approached the company. I said, hey, can you give us all your resources and all of your, multi-billion dollar, access to all the things that you have access to? Can we take all your tools, all the things that we normally have access to, but we focus on a particular product, and can we just let people just make whatever they want? Or can a person take a step back? Can they not make what they want? Can they write about like what they want? Like we had a person that did nothing but just journal for the entire week, like that just wrote about games. Like it's about engagement, and Dream Week is also about how you as a user want to engage. It's not a deadline. It's not a timeline. It's not. Like, some people do engage better based on deadlines or timelines, and some people want to compete with each other. So we did elect a panel of judges, like from every demographic and sexual background and race and everything, like in geographic background. We made a very diverse panel of judges, but the goal was to make sure that everybody felt recognized, that everybody felt like they were doing something that was worthy, and just give them the full weight of a corporation to make their dreams come true.
That's epic, man. I love because the fact, you have an international team, right? Like spread out all over the world. So diversity.
I'm up all hours of the night interfacing with, people in the UK. We have a studio in Britain. We have a studio in the Czech Republic. We have actually multiple studios in the Czech Republic. We have outsourcers that we work with in China. I don't get much sleep. I work a lot. But when you love what you do,
Yeah.
Never work another day in your life. That was something my dad taught me. That's something that, I hold true to my story is, when you genuinely enjoy what you're doing, and like I felt this way working with Dave as well. It's like, it's not a job anymore. It's really, now it's a passion. It's a drive. It's something that is a defining characteristic to look back around. I statted up. Like it just became another stat of mine. But okay, well, I leveled up my game dev stats today.
Hell yeah, dude. I love taking the time to link up, kick it with you. Dream Week, I mean, it just seems like something that creatives need, right? Like we kind of always...
No, not just creative. It's something that everybody needs.
People.
Yeah, people need.
Like people in finance, people in marketing, people in HR, people in services.
That was the thing, is that as part of Dream Week is you don't have to do your normal job. One of the coolest projects. So Dream Week was actually inspired or appropriated is probably the better word, like from LucasArts, like pre-closure back in 2009. And I probably displayed the ribbon on my wall. Like I got best knockoff. and some people would take that offensively.
Copy something.
Like, what? Like, well, we had made a 1942 clone.
1942 is like vertical, top-down, plane scrolling up shoots. Like bullet shooter plane thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of Japanese bullet shooter kind of games out there. Well, yeah, we thank you for giving some context for your listeners. We had 4 people. We had myself. We had a producer. We had a audio guy, and we had an animator. Shout out to Kento. But we didn't have a modeler. We didn't have a person that could make models for a game. So again, designing within constraints. And what we did is we took a camera, like back in the day when you had like handheld cameras, like now where it was a phone, an actual camera. Like we took top-down pictures of each of the stuffed animals in the office, and then the stuffed animals became the characters. We would tilt them slightly 45 degrees. We take a picture. Like, it's the way you do stop motion.
Yeah.
It's the way Robot Chicken was made. Like, you do stop motion. Like, and so all we did is we hit frames. And
yes, and that's the turning and banking.
Yeah, they're turning and banking.
Nice.
You turn or left or right. The gameplay, except for the final unicorn boss battle that I'd made, I stayed 72 hours over the weekend in order to get that boss battle in.
What was the time frame for Dream Week? Was it a week, literally, like 7 days?
It was 7 days, but one of the things that we settled on, like talking to HR and and working with the international team, we're very big on corporate culture, and we don't want to ask people to work outside of normal working hours. So we did not want to extend it over the weekend. We did not want to have people coming in on a Saturday or Sunday working on it. So we stuck to 5 days, like a normal 8-hour.
Start Monday, submit Friday night, or start Monday, review Monday?
Because we had to deal with the Czech Republic. So the Czech Republic is 9 hours ahead. So they're GMT +1. We started on their beginning of their workday.
And
then we ended on the end of their workday on Friday. So
okay.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't remember that's another thing about Dream Week is that people submitted shit late. Like I didn't care. Like
we don't give a shit about deadlines.
No, we do. For people who want deadlines, we gave them a deadline.
Yes.
For people who don't want deadlines, there were 3 vectors of Dream Week. Right? There were people who wanted to compete, and even within that, there were people that wanted to have a preform team and people that wanted to be match made. So I actually made 2 queues. Like if you have a pre-made queue team, the same way that we do matchmaking in a game.
Yeah.
So they don't get judged. They don't get judged by the same categories as the people who were solo queue. They have a whole different judging category. Like I'm gonna write a blog post.
That's super equitable, right? Like because there's definitely advantages to like having rapport and knowing each other versus people like having to get to know each other just to start working together.
No, the people that were working together for the first time, we had the match made masters, we had the best indie solo, like we had different awards that we gave to each group based on what their like ideas were and how they worked within those constraints. Because it's not fair. Like some of the pre-made teams had been working for a month ahead of time, even before we announced Dream Week, because they already had a team. They were already working on Rat Catcher was one of the names of the games where you have to catch a rat as a cat. There were two separate teams in the Czech Republic. They were already working on this for a month ahead of time, and it wasn't fair to judge them against the other team. So when we did the award ceremony, like we had a whole separate category Like we acknowledge the people who were not in either of those queues.
Okay.
And that's what it's all about. That's what streaming is about. It's about acknowledging everybody, saying, hey, these are the cool things, like, that you did, these are the cool things I do. They're not always equitable. They're not always exactly, quality, based, but, some people work better under a deadline, but some people don't work good under a deadline. So that was only one aspect of it. That was the forward facing. That was the, let's promote and let's like do this thing. We also had the free dreamers is what I call them, or the lucid dreamers is what I call them.
Lucid dreamers. Yes.
Yeah. Which is, just do whatever you want. Do it on your own time. Do it at your own schedule. Nobody's going to be pressuring you. Nobody's going to be giving you a time or a deadline or anything. Take this week for yourself to work on your own, whatever you think is best.
Damn.
Then that kind of freedom is the thing that people came back to me time and time again. And I passed these thanks along to the other people, because I was only one of the organizers. I was the most front facing one, but I was only one of the people like that was making all this happen. Like it took a lot of work behind the scenes, like, get the leads on board, to get the licensing. Like, think about this, like, if we're gonna be making something as an official studio, we have to make sure that every single thing is licensed. Everything, several thing is, if you're using a piece of software, if you're using an asset, if you're using a sound, everything has to be fully licensed in order to be in compliance, because we can't make ourselves vulnerable like that. We're a big company. Like, if we're doing, even if it's never released to the public, even if it's not for commercial release, even doing something like that, like, it's something, again, it gets back to, you don't think about the marketing costs. You don't think about the licensing of the software costs or the licensing of the asset costs. Every single thing that was made in Dream Week had to be homegrown, had to be handmade.
Okay.
You're not allowed to use anything unless it is like MIT license or something that's already free licensed for public use. Like that was the only, like, so stuff on the Unreal store was all fair game.
Okay.
Because when you buy it in perpetuity.
Yes.
Part of organizing Dream Week was making sure that everybody was in compliance.
So that, like, I'm just curious about the rule set, right? Like, we got the time frame. Is everybody using like a same set of? Is it a consistent engine? Is it consistent like IDE? Or
I wanted to make it more open, like where you could use
whatever.
You use whatever, but due to compliance, we had to restrict it, to Unreal, just because that was the only one that we could guarantee compliance.
Okay, you guys had a I don't know what they call it, multi-user license or something.
We contacted Unity. We got in touch with one of their like biz dev people. Like we had conditional licenses, but then they would face that after the event, like they're going to take back the licenses, and like
because Unity is like per seat, right?
Yeah. And so it was
expensive.
It was a whole thing. But no, we looked at Godot Engine. We looked at
Godot's free.
We looked at the whatever the successor to Lumberyard is. It's called
Open3DE. Yeah.
Open3DE. Yeah. We looked at all these things, and I wanted to encourage people to look at other tool sets and look at other pipelines, because I think we just come off of using our own internal engine for the last 30 years or whatever. Right?
Yeah, it's so good to see how other ways to do the thing, right, and like bring that back.
Yeah. It's good just to look at other tool sets and other ways of thinking, and like other design paradigms and patterns and like everything. I just learned recently that Unreal has utility blueprints. You can build tools. You can build tools in the Unreal Engine in Blueprint. Like you can make Unreal Blueprint tools like that are like windows that show up like as an editor window. They're not real.
Oh shit! So like MF, like Windows. Okay. I gotta look this up, man. You're teaching me.
It's still in the engine.
Okay, in the engine, separate windows.
Browser window out or an asset browser window or something like that.
Tools are my jam, bro. So I gotta look into this. I'm excited.
Yeah. You look. They used to call it Blutility. I think it was the old term. But yeah, utility. It's utility blueprints.
That's native to the engine. That's not like a plugin, a third-party plugin.
Right. As a 16-year-old game like ideologist, like you have an idea, but you don't know how to make games yet. Why are we making it so hard for them? Like, why is it so hard for a person that just has a game idea? Like I've been pitched so many game ideas by people outside the game industry. When I tell them I'm a game designer, like they come to me and they say, "Oh, I have this idea for a game. Why don't we do this and this and this?" And I say to them the same thing I would say to any of my students, the same thing I'd say to anybody else's game jam that I'm evaluating. What is the goal? How do you win or lose? When what hurdles are you presenting the player along the way?
Boom. Bring it all full circle. All right, my friend, we are going to enter the final round. Are you ready?
Final round.
Final round.
It's the final round.
I forgot, man. You got a good voice, man. We haven't done like...
I play in a band in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Max Rats.
God damn. I love it. All right. What's the last game you finished?
Shit. Oh, finished? Like, okay, are you talking about completionist?
Roll the
credits.
credits.
Half-Life Alex was the last
Ooh,
one I
yeah.
did to the credits.
Did you think that was a great like test of the medium?
It is Half-Life 3. It really is. It's the next evolution of Half-Life that is the best. I mean, like, I play a lot of games for competitive analysis, and I watch a lot of pro players play games. I love games done quick. I love seeing the way people hack their ways around games or use glitches like in order to get past like certain areas. It reminds me the importance of QA and how much I loved being in QA and how valuable our QA testers are. Like, I think with a work from home environment, like people are trying to outsource that stuff. And like, you have to have embedded QA. You have to have QA testers that are in part of your pod that like understand what the goals are.
100%.
If you have to make a AAA game dev pod, you got to have a designer, you got to have a producer, you got to have QA. Those are the three basic requirements. Like engineer would be great. Sometimes
artist would be great.
Artists would be great. Sometimes they're not always available. Ooh, those are shared resources. So
yeah, they're always shared. Audio person, yeah. What's the last book you read or listened to?
Oh, I was just reading Ready Player 2. I really loved Ernie Klein. It's like I both read and listened to the audiobook. It's narrated by Will Wheaton. I don't know if he's still doing tabletop gaming, but he used to do a great thing over
on
there
YouTube,
where you would show different tabletop games, which like, again, it's like one of these things where I don't always have the full amount of time to like sit down and play a game, but if I can watch a game or if I can watch somebody break down the rules, and they do a really good job of making it entertaining, keeping the rule set relevant and like making but understanding the context of the game. Like they get into the character. It's like watching your favorite Star Trek actors embody the roles of the characters in the board games.
That's cool. The little role playing aspect of it. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've done a lot, Ben. You know, like you said,
I wouldn't say I've done a lot. I said I've done a little.
Okay,
I've done a little bit of everything.
Little bit of everything, right? Like you've worked on one of almost every type of game in the genre, across platform, across types. You've been in robotics, you've entrepreneured some shit, you've been in academia. Of all of those, right? If you had to pick one thing, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of being a student. I'm an eternal student, and everybody should be an eternal student. I'm learning every day. Every single thing that I've done is just another way for me to gain knowledge. Like, until the day I die, until I have my last breath, like I'm going to be an eternal student, and everybody should strive to be so. There is no mastery, like there is no completionist score in the game of life. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Is a common adage, but the only way you lose, bringing it full circle, the win-loss condition, the only way you lose the game of life is when you stop trying.
I'm with you. I agree. The day you stop learning is the day you die, man. The day your mind stops being important or stops having inputs, right? So it's not going to give you any outputs. I like that. I'm with you. If you can go back and talk to 18-year-old Ben Retan, what would you tell him?
Shit, I was making great stock investments at the time. I would have said, keep your stock investments. But if I had to give him like a nugget of wisdom, if I had to give him the nugget, I would say, listen more, talk less.
Oh, okay. The 2 ears, one mouth.
Yeah, one mind, 2 ears.
Yeah, okay. Dope. I like that one. All right, brother. Where can people reach out, connect with you, see what you guys are working on? Are you guys hiring?
We absolutely are hiring at 2K. We have a job board there listed. We have a couple projects in the works. If you reach out to our recruiters, they can tell you a little bit more about what opportunities are available. You can also look me up on benretan.com. You can look me up on my website. I do want to say a couple of things. So I'm trying to think about like what the future of not just gaming is, but the future of game development and like
interactive media.
How to make it better for developers to make games as opposed to just like that's part of what my learnings were from 3 Week was like I was observing, I was watching, like how do we make the future of gaming together in collaboration, and how do we not reinvent the exploding?
Amen to that, bro. Amen to that. I'm with that. I'm on the eternal search for like optimizing game engines and teaching people to use these things and not have to, what do we say? We say like you spend 60-70% of the time just making something work and you only have like 30-40% to make it fun. You know what I'm saying? I want to flip that shit.
Also, another thing that I kind of knew this like as 18-year-old Ben, but like something I'd say to myself again, like just to reiterate, write everything down. If you are a new person, I can't recount the number of journals like that I found recently that are like, especially during COVID when you start to pull out all the boxes and you start to open up all the books, you're like, damn, that was a great idea that I wrote down like 18 years ago. Like write everything down. And even if it's on a whiteboard, even if it's temporary, like the act of writing, they say this in education when you're learning about education, you learn so much from listening, you learn so much from like speaking, you learn so much from writing, you learn the most from teaching. But like the act of taking it from your conscious mind and like having to, alliterate, trying to write that down, like if you're trying to transcribe like your thoughts, like, it is a really important process. Again, it gets back to the quantum computing, those neural pathways.
Definitely. I plus 1,000 that. I like that too, right? Like we can watch things to the end of time. We can listen to things, but it is until we go through the active step of writing it down that it actually starts to kind of sink in, right?
But what's the difference between books and games?
Exactly, right? Passive versus interactive, right?
Active. Yeah, passive versus active.
Passive versus active.
Interaction. Like through the act of writing it down, you are being active. You're no longer passive.
Love it. Who do you nominate? Right now we're on the second season of the podcast, right? So we already know the criteria.
I already know what you're getting at. I'm telling you, Ken Hudson. Ken Hudson, your next guest.
All right, you nominate Ken Hudson to fall out of the play area behind you, Ben. I'm gonna make that shit happen. And even if I got a name drop you, I was like, yo, bro, Ben Retan wants to hear you come on the show. You can't say no to him. I'm gonna make that happen for you, bro. Do you have any last words for the people out there before we wrap it up?
Don't stop dreaming. You may think that you're just a pawn in the game of life. You might think that you're being played by other players. Take back that agency. Remember that you are your own master of your own reality, and that this is just a dream. We're just the imaginations of ourselves, and your perception is reality.
Going back to that dream thing, one last thing before we wrap it up. How much work or time or effort did it take to make Dream Week a reality?
Months of red tape, paperwork, getting across country borders, state borders. Like it was not an easy process, but I had a great group of people helping me along the way. It takes a village to make a game. There is no grandma's boy. Like you can't.
Oh God!
You don't make a game in isolation. You don't.
On the console, he just took the Xbox home and he put the game on the controller.
There was a guy who made a Titanic mod to Mafia, like original Mafia 1.
Yeah.
Like it took 20 years to make it. If you want to get something to market, like if you want it to be in your lifetime, you got to work with people, be willing to work with people, be willing to make concessions, reach across the aisle, shake hands with people and, listen.
Speaking of working with people, we do want to mention that we have some jobs open here at 2K. You can go to 2K.com and there's a job section. You can also go to the Greenhouse website. That website is going to be boards.greenhouse.io/2K.
I love it, yo. All right, we out of here. In this industry, I'm lucky to bump into people who offer such an interesting perspective on the way to look at life and thinkers that I can have a profound conversation with in whatever direction without any kind of guidance or notes. I mean, Ben is a self-proclaimed lifelong student who admits to not being able to sleep because he's always working on something. This interview felt different to me compared to my other episodes. It felt like we were simply on a wave just discussing the art of games. And if it didn't sink in, remember, the first thing about making a game is defining the goal. What's the win condition? What's the loss condition? I know this is a wide spectrum in interactive entertainment, and you could definitely get into a debate on what it means to be a game and it not having to have a specific win or loss condition. I remember in my days in school, it's definitely one of the early bits we're taught when breaking down game theory. I can walk away with a bit more pride in what I do. Up until this conversation, I would not have looked at somebody designing chess to be an artist. And now, I agree. If you can break down a rule set that eloquently, that everything kind of balances out and leads to a win, a loss, or a stalemate, that is an art. And not everyone can do it. It makes me think about the time I went through Rules of the Game at Full Sail, my class with Dave Arneson, the creator of Dungeons & Dragons. And I'll be honest, for me, I didn't appreciate that time. I couldn't tell you much about that class other than getting to know about an awesome board game in Catan, right? That was my biggest takeaway from that class. And if I could go retake that with him, I would. But I'll never have that opportunity again because Dave has moved on to that next life RPG. So I really take advantage of being able to talk to people like Ben or Jameson Durrell, who, unlike me, cherished that class and soaked it up and really connected with one of the OGs in this game space. One of the greatest things I took away from Amazon was our dedicated leadership principle to learn and be curious, which manifested itself as actual days in the scheduling, right? I think it was like 20% of our schedule would be learn and be curious days. And we were empowered to go off and pick up a new technology, read something, anything that would get the creative juices flowing that we could bring back as a skill to empower the business or what have you. And then even at EA, we had something like this. I forget what they were called. And it was something that was easy to kind of be like, oh yeah, we'll push this off to planning or we'll push it off to the next milestone. So you got to be careful and make sure that it stays planned. But having it as part of the culture was something that I'll never forget because normally up until then, everything I had done at a game studio was just feverishly behind the pursuit of getting whatever project shipped or completed or hitting the next milestone to get the next green light meeting or something like that. And at Epic, I'm still trying to figure it out, right? Like, ultimately, it's very easy to take advantage of the limitless amount of resources we have available and go propose something and then pursue it. But I'm still trying to learn the tact and strategy, right? And still trying to deliver my first big win as part of the team and prove myself. For Ben to come into a company where it's not the culture and really propose that and spin it up grassroots with a group of people and invest the months and months and months into making the time and finding the technology and clearing all the assets and defining a rule set and making it as inclusive to all the types of workers and people that you have, it's just fantastic. And it's a huge feat. It is no small feat. I think that was my favorite part of the interview, was hearing about what Dream Week is, how it came to be, and what people got out of it. I would love to connect with more people who went through Dream Week. If you were there, hit me up. I'd welcome your story. On episode 32 of Out of Play Area, we sit down with Zachmoon Bach, a designer at the Wandering Band. I got to know about him as a result of reading Jason Schreier's Press Reset book. When I was working at EA at the time, he had this kind of dream run through the company where he got into QA and worked his way up the ranks to senior producer to do all types of things at EA and work on some amazing franchises. You won't want to miss that story. That debuts on Monday, May 9th. Make sure to follow us so that you don't miss out on that episode. Thank you for listening, devs. If you found this episode informative, I ask that you pay a link forward to a developer to help grow our listener community. If you're a game developer with a story you think could help a fellow dev out, please go to outofplayarea.com and click on the Calendly link at the top to meet up. Please make sure you get approval from your manager or studio's PR or HR team beforehand. Out of Play Area, the Game Developers Podcast, releases new episodes every other Monday on all the major players, including Spotify, Apple, and Google. Please make sure to follow us to see what developer falls out of the play area next time. I'm your host, John Diaz. Until next time, devs, stay strong, stay true, stay dangerous.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff. Cabin crew, please take your seats. We are now about to enter the out-of-play area. Yeah. If you can't reach me, I apologize. Since we out of play, I never compromise. John D, NYC, know we got the vibes. Make sure you hit that follow and you hit subscribe. Out of Play Area Podcast. Out of Play Area Podcast. We gotta play. It's just a little something for the game devs. Stay strong, stay true, and stay dangerous. Had to switch the styles for a challenge. Best thing out of Harlem since young Miles Morales. A new podcast comes to provide the balance with game dev veterans and rising talents. Out of Play. Welcome to the Out of Play Area Podcast, a show by game devs for game devs, with no ads, no BS, just the real. Welcome to the Out of Play Area. Let's go.